future really seriously, I think this is a gift to be able to get, more people into science and engineering so you can go change the world. Because I feel I've been given that gift with the ability to go and learn and do computer science. And I want each and every one of you to kind of experience the same joy I experience every day doing what I do, right? So if I can share even a little bit of that today, I would have done my job. I would like you to stop and ask me questions. I have a rising senior, a daughter. She's my only child. And so I previewed what I'm going to tell you with her last night. And she said, "Mom, snooze fest." So I said, "No." So I was up to the wee hours trying to unsnooze fest it. So we'll see how well I did, okay? But she gave me some very valuable tips. She said, "You don't understand how a 17-year-old thinks, Mom." Yeah, possibly. I could was 17, but it's a dim past now. So yes, I understand. So she gave me some ideas. So let's see, whether all that works out. So I'm going to talk to you about machine learning today. So just a show of hands here. Even before I tell you about this, how many of you are juniors? Just show of hands of juniors.
Rising juniors?
Rising juniors, yes. Rising juniors, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, rising juniors, yeah. And rising seniors. Oh, any more? Okay. Well, wonderful. Wonderful. I just wanted to get a sense of the balance of the audience, because then I can tell what I'm going to tell you. So that's great. I think it should be accessible to all of you. So, machine learning. Have you all heard of the buzz about machine learning? Have you kind of, at least in the academic world, we're going, ooh, about machine learning. I guess it hasn't yet penetrated. So I expected you to say no. So this is good. Because yesterday I asked my daughter, I do this stuff, and she says, "Who's machine learning?" I go, "Oh, man. You weren't listening to me at all, weren't you, when I was telling you all these things." So I get it. I'm a mom of a 17-year-old. So what machine learning is let me begin by asking, you are using machine learning every minute of your lives and you don't know it. So how many of you have used Gmail or something, a mail program? 100%. Okay. Are you satisfied with the way your mailer sort of eliminates the spam mail that we all inevitably get? You're pretty happy with it? Now you're not too happy with it, but you're glad it exists, right? Yeah. So here is the challenge. My generation has built those tools. Your challenge is to make it better. Okay. And now, so spam tools didn't exist, of course, when email was just starting, because email was something that was only, people who were working for the Defense Department or research sponsored by the Defense Department. So I was one of the first users of email. So that's how old I am. And we didn't have to worry about spam. We just had to worry about will the email actually get to the intended recipient. Those were the issues. But today, it's come so far, we don't even think about using it. And second, a lot of sort of people who want to use it for their own ends are cluttering up our inboxes, because the reliability of the delivery mechanism is so damn good. Okay. So another thing, right? Now, my Gmail ID, so I just have to tell you this before I go on to this, is Devika, my first name, @gmail.com. Do you know I get every Devika on the planet's email in my inbox? So I'm afraid to open my Gmail folder, actually, because it has all kinds of really personal stuff. And it's like I hit delete, or select all, or whatever, just to get it out. So you might say, why is that? So clearly the recipient, even delivering stuff to the right Devika isn't working that well. So I know there are a lot of problems. But have you stopped to think about how does the computer figure out, that this is junk mail and this is not? I agree, it could be, not doing as great a job as you'd like, but you have an idea how it might do it?
Well, it has an algorithm that looks at the subject, who's sending it, maybe, and what's in the message, and it looks at your previous action. Like for example, if it sees that you delete a bunch of messages from one specific sender, then it tracks that type of information.
Good. So there is an algorithm, but did you notice what you said? It actually observes you interacting with your email and tries to learn your preferences.
Yeah.
That's machine learning, friends. Because a machine is looking over your shoulder, watching you, and going, oh, he likes this, he doesn't like her, you know, whatever. And then pretty soon. So let me ask you this. If you have a mail filter and I start to use it to filter my email, you think I'll be happy or unhappy?
It depends what filter it is.
I agree, but you know, I'll be mostly unhappy because the likelihood of our, you know, I'm just too old, you know, as my daughter likes to remind me, right? My taste in music also, you know, it's not going to work. Each one of you has the mail filter. Each one of you, if you swap the mail filter with another individual, it's unlikely to work for you. Why? Because we are all individuals there, right? Now imagine if to write a mail filter for you, we had to get a programmer to sit down and figure out the algorithm for you. What do you like, right? I mean, this is ridiculous, you know? There are 7 billion people on the planet. Maybe not all of them use email. Let's say 3 billion. You know, we're not going to make 3 billion programmers, right, and have them do that. So this is why we're interested and so excited about machine learning. Because we are not going to program our machines the standard way by saying, if you see this email, do that, and if you see that email, do that. Because all those rules are very specific to us, and they're not portable across us. So instead, we write a more general algorithm. And I'll tell you why. I'll take your question in a minute. Okay. Ask yourself the following. How, you know, so I look at you, I recognize you now, but I don't know your name. So what's your name?
Got it.
Okay. So I look at him and I say, got it, right? If I see you several hours from now, or maybe even next week, I will identify you. Got it. How do I do that? Right? If I want a machine to recognize faces, what am I going to say? Well, it's got him because, and the algorithm is, take the distance between Garam's eyes and divide that by the square root of the length of his nose and multiply that by, I mean, there's no such, whatever it is. I mean, we don't know. I mean, think about how you learn to recognize faces, right? When your mom pointed to your dad and said, when you were a baby, said, Dad, right? She didn't say, and here's the formula, right? Right? She didn't, because that's not how we learn, right? How did you learn the concept of a chair, right? I mean, when you went to elementary school, they say, well, let's explain the algorithm for recognizing chairs. And then your teacher write down 20 rules for recognizing chairs. No! You said, chair, not a chair, right? And then from those examples, you figured out the rule. This is how we're going to work with machines. It's too tedious to program them by telling them exactly what to do. Wouldn't it be cool if we could interact with our machines and have them figure out the rule just by showing them examples? Because that's how we learn. I mean, you're taking classes right now, say in math. Sure, your teacher explains some concepts, but then does she explain every single thing? She says, do this example, right? And do that other example. And when you go to an examination, you get a problem. You probably haven't seen that ever in your life, but you know what to do. Because you've done enough examples before and you figure it out. So if you want to show a machine a brand new problem, a brand new face, at least it'll be able to say, oh, this is a new face, I haven't seen that before, right? What is that person's name? So that's what machine learning is. And it underlies almost all these technologies that we use today. Do you use Google Translate?
Yes.
I know. My daughter does her French homework on it. Don't tell her teacher. She's not supposed to use it. And that was the one time I asked her, do you know how that works? And she had no idea. know how it works? It's pretty good. I mean, you know, it's good enough for C+, and then I have to actually open the dictionary and do some more work in order to, you know, get a better grade. But it gets me the sentences translated. Particularly for translation, it's pretty good. All right. But would it surprise you to know that the way Translate was built, Google Translate, was by machine learning? How do you do that? You show the computer, here's a sentence in English, here it is in French. Here's a sentence in English, here it is in French. And you basically build millions of these sentences, right? And you give that to the machine, and the machine figures out. That's what the job of people like me are. And hopefully the job of people like you in the future is how do you get the computer to abstract out the correct rules so we don't have to have it everywhere. This is why I'm so excited about machine learning. How many of you use Amazon to shop? Okay. Are you spooked like I am about how it seems to exactly know what you want? Right? Particularly if you're a local person, you've been shopping at Amazon for that long. I always joke that Amazon knows me better than my husband of 27 years. Because it knows what I want for my birthday, truly. And I go, oh my word, what's at the heart of that? I mean, does it really know me? I mean, right? I mean, there are 300 million of us in the US. And I have talked to colleagues and friends, and they say, yeah, it's so true. It always gives me stuff I want to buy. And I go, is it modeling each one of us and has this real sense of who we are? A little frightening, frankly. I mean, I'm a computer scientist, but I don't think I would ever have an emotional connection to my machines. I still want my emotional connections to be with, like, people made of carbon. Not yet, haven't yet sort of expanded my realm to include, even though I work in artificial intelligence and I build machines with emotion, the truth is, I always think there's a human barrier, you know? So when Amazon knows me this well, I have to ask, how does it do that? And the short answer is, it's been watching me. Because every click I make, it knows. So it knows I like books on machine learning. It knows I like, books on mathematics. It knows my preferences in literature. It knows my preferences in vacuum cleaners. I mean, it knows my preferences on too many things. So, and you can relate that to your own experience. And again, how does it learn? This is what it's doing: watching, and picking up, my preferences. And it also does one more thing. Amazon wasn't just made for me. It was made for all of us. So it says, okay, actually Amazon makes a damn good guess about who you are, other than the credit card number, of course. It actually knows how old you are, what gender you are, etc., etc. And so if we can do that, it basically tries to group me with people like me, my age group, my gender, and so forth. And so it uses not just the clicks I'm making, but clicks people like me are making. So there's so much information that it draws upon to tell me what I should buy. Yeah? So, this is why I'm so excited for your generation. Right? I'm excited for your generation because we are at a point where we can measure and collect data on so many things, right? Now we're talking about wearables, right? So your shirt is going to figure out how healthy you are, and it's going to tell you it's time for your run, or whatever. I'm sure my shirt would tell me that if I had a wearable on. And that's coming. Right? Your generation is going to build. We're just starting to scrape the surface of that. Your generation will go out. How will it do that? They'll be gathering data. What's your heart rate? What's your, all the kinds of things. And they're so small, they're miniaturized, you won't even know you're wearing them, right? And that's going to be silently observing it, accumulating all this information, making the patterns and going, so maybe when I reach for that extra piece of leather on tie, it's going to say, stay away. That's what the future will be like. How do we exploit the massive amounts of data we gather to help answer questions that matter to us? So I don't want, only think about applications that are kind of, remind you of the nanny state or anything. I mean, we could think about things that will make us better in a lot of ways. For example, about 1% of the American population suffers from epilepsy. Right? That's a terrible condition. And right now I'm working on a little project where you can wear a headset, very light headset, and that's constantly monitoring your brain activity. And it can recognize the signature of a seizure coming on. So 3 minutes before, it will buzz your phone and say, sit down or lie down, so till the seizure passes. So if you're doing something like walking up the stair or whatever. So all these applications become possible. Why? Because we're gathering data. We build powerful machine learning algorithms that can learn from those patterns and actually, give you help. So this is the picture I like to draw, sort of how all this will work. So typically we're interested in some complicated system drawn in black over there. It could be you or me. We're trying to understand that system. In the case of Amazon, that complex system is you. They're trying to persuade you to buy stuff. So what does Amazon do? It does everything on the top line there. So yeah. It watches you making clicks on their site. That's their training data. They have prior knowledge about how the world works. They build learning algorithms. This is my day job. I make these green boxes. These are algorithms that figure out how to use this data to build what I call predictive models. They predict what you might like. They predict your preferences. And then Amazon will display a page and say, have you considered buying this? Right? And then of course, we will respond and say, yeah, how do you want to use that? Boom. So this is how Google Translate works also. You give it training data, which is English sentence, French sentence. You figure out the patterns. You build a predictive model that can predict the French sentence based on the English sentence. So when you put in a new English sentence, it can come up with the right French translation. So all of them work in this kind of way. So if you want to build systems like this, then you have to answer some fundamental questions. So what data should you gather to make these predictions, right? In the case of Amazon, the only way they can observe you now is through your clicks. I can imagine other technologies where you give them access to even more information, that they can even gather that. Then how do you build those green boxes? That's hard. And that's where mathematics comes to our rescue, friends. So if you are in a math class and you're wondering, what is this good for? All of machine learning rests on mathematics. And so learn all the mathematics you can get your hands on. Okay? I did that and I have benefited tremendously from that. So even if the mathematics doesn't quite click for you, I've asked that question. My daughter asked me that question a lot. Stick with it. Because today I'm going to show you how stuff you have learned, maybe 9th or 10th grade, mathematics that was discovered in the 18th century is powering handwriting recognition, face recognition, face detection, like when your camera says, here's a face, and a host of other problems. All of it rests on one piece of mathematics that you already know. How cool is that? If I told you you can write a handwriting recognition system after you leave my lecture today, using mathematics you already know, come on, a little more surprise. Is it a snooze fest already? So that's what we're going to do today. So we'll build a model today, and so you can see exactly how spam detection, face detection, handwriting recognition are all examples of one simple idea. So why am I so excited about machine learning? Because you can replace guesswork and intuition with analysis of real data, right? Because otherwise you'd have to guess what email you want to read, or maybe some smart person looks around and says, this is the kind of email you ought to be reading, right? As opposed to actually observing you and getting data specific to you and figuring out the patterns that you like. And so the results are you get systems that really improve continuously. So machine learning is going to be embedded in more and more of the systems that you are interacting with every day, right? The simplest kind will simply remember what you did before, like Google Maps, right? It remembers my home now because I've constantly been asking it to route me from my home to a number of places in the city. So it always gives me that option, and I'm grateful for that. That's a very simple kind of learning. It's like, oh yeah, I know the web, so obviously that's an important part. But more and more sophisticated kinds of learning that will embody everything that you use on your smartphone. There's machine learning that's powering it. Okay? If you look carefully, you will see it. All right. So that was just by way of introduction and to motivate you, to think about machine learning, give you a kind of cartoonish idea of what it is. We will do the spam detection and handwriting recognition. So detecting email spam and doing handwriting recognition, you use the same method. The same method. The same mathematics. Would you have guessed those two problems are even like remotely related?
Yes, they are.
Yes? Did someone say yes?
Yes.
Awesome. And why do you think so?
Well, I'm a programmer, so I have a different perspective than most of the people in here. So I
have an exercise for you, my friend. I will give you the algorithm, and you will email me tomorrow or whenever you finish it. It's a 10-line program, which I'm sure you can write.
Okay.
And it will recognize handwritten digits to knock your socks off. Mine are already off.
Does it matter whether I use which language I use? Java,
I wrote mine in Python. I'm assuming you're using some high-level language, not assembly language.
Would you mind if I use Java?
It's okay.
I'm
not a language.
I'm better with that.
No, it's whatever you like.
Okay.
We all have our favorites, right? So.
Yeah. Okay.
Good.
Thank you.
But before I go into that, I was told I should tell you what got me to where I am. Any of you curious about what got me here? Or my daughter says snooze fest. That was the snooziest of the part. But maybe because she knows who I am. Maybe it was like, oh, heard that before. You guys don't know, so maybe this will be all right. Okay, so I have to give you, well, I guess it's no surprise. I'm from India. And I know, based on what I see my daughter learning, because she's born here, and so I see her learning history and geography. And I have to say, it's not, even though she did AP World History, you don't really go into a lot of detail about other countries. So I thought I'll give you a little bit about India, so you walk away today not even thinking of, knowing a little bit more about how my country works. So here's the good news. We are a democracy, just like this one. We have states, just like this one. We have 50 states, and they all have their state capitals. But unlike this country, the cool thing about India is when you go from state to state, it's like it's more like Europe. It's a completely different world. You get completely different foods, people wear very different clothes. It's awesome, right? Because I was born in this state, southern state of Tamil Nadu, just approximately about here. My dad worked over there. And every summer we would make a train journey that on hugging the coast. And we would, go through so many states along the way. It was awesome. It was one of the highlights of my childhood, because each time we moved into a new state, the stuff they'd be selling in the train stations would be so different, the books would be different, everything was just nice. But anyway, that's where I was born. I thought I'd tell you where. In fact, a little more detail, because this is... I found a map on Google that actually had a little point. So this is the capital city, Chennai, which is one of the 4 largest cities in India. And I was born over here. And actually, thanks to Google Maps, I was able to zoom in down to the home where I was born. That was scary. I thought I wouldn't go back. But let me just show you. I was born in this tiny river island, one of the mighty rivers on the southern India. See that strip of land right there? Right there. That X marks the spot. So I picked back fondly of this. Why? This particular river island was where all the scholars in that whole area lived. So I was fortunate to be born in such a family. And so the main town was over here, but all these guys lived on this river island. So they were austere people who devoted their time to studying, Sanskrit texts, the Latin for India, if you will. And I always joke, the claim to fame for this little river island is it produced, so the guy, a person named C.V. Raman, was born just next door, like 4 miles away. Was it C.V. Raman? Oh my God, who's that? Well, he invented Raman scattering, and he won a Nobel Prize for that. If you come to Rice and study in the nanophotonics group, you will be doing, Raman scattering. He's the guy. He was born 75 years before me, and 1 door to the left. So my joke is, 75 years too late, 1 door short. But anyway, he produced a lot of that, so I'm very proud to come from there, right? You have to understand that for a woman of my, a person like me, of growing up in that time in India, the most liberating thing for me was, while a lot was expected of men, like the brothers, nothing was expected of me, which is fantastic. There was no pressure. Really, do what you want, just don't get into trouble. Which is a very low bar. Don't get into trouble. It's pretty easy to handle. So I had the freedom to do all kinds of things, and I was left alone, which is sort of the happiest. And my parents, my dad retired as he's no longer a professor, but he was a professor. So I had access to a lot of books and things, and he never. And I was this curious child. So I'd always be creeping into his study and opening up his books on thermodynamics. Not that I understood a word. And I would ask Dad, what's entropy? He said, great, figure it out. So that was the best thing he did for me. He never tried to explain anything. He said, you're curious about it? There's that book. Oh, that's 400 pages. Are you really curious about it? Which was great. So I learned early that if I wanted to solve problems, I really have to go and take initiative and learn. And so this was sort of the happiest thing. The downside of it was there were very few people like me who were also women. So a lot of my friends were, unfortunately or fortunately, I don't know, boys of my age, right? Because they were trying to take apart the electrical system in their house, My mother would always say, and don't touch the blender. I need it, right? Because I'll be taking apart those things. Do not. And one time, shorted out the whole electricity in the house, and my dad said, okay, hands off now. I can't be repairing every little thing. So he got me a bike, and he said, you can take it apart however many times you like. Just, because it's just yours, and you won't have a bike if you don't know how to put it together again. So I was very fortunate, very fortunate. The other thing I was fortunate, this is actually my middle school. Now, this looks very nice, but this is a very recent photo. When I went, picture this, without all the whitewashed stuff, just a concrete block building. See all the paved stuff? Just dirt. And so I have to go back and visit this amazing looking building, because it wasn't this amazing. But I'll tell you what made the place amazing and I have such good memories of. The teachers. They were so encouraging and willing to spend time outside of school, answering my questions. Because I was like you, my friend. And the number of times I've been thrown out of the classroom, I just hesitate to list, right? Because I would always be thinking, could we do it this way? The teacher would say, can I just get through this so then we can look at this other way? No. My way's better. We really want to hear my way. But they encouraged me nonetheless. I'm grateful for that. And I was lucky because most, for my generation, women were supposed to be seen and not heard. and I was only heard, probably not seen, because I was one of the shortest ones, and I was always in the back row. So all of you in the back row, worry not. I have to tell you what happened, what made me come from the back row to the front row. And for that, I have to thank my high school. So again, clearly they didn't ask my approval for that garish pink. It wasn't that at all. I don't know who chose that color scheme. But that's my old high school. And by the way, that garish pink building didn't exist. You see that white building in the back? That was where I went. I got my high school. I did my high school. So this was actually run by a missionary, by missionaries. And my math teacher in the school was the principal of the school, right? And so 9th grade math, she'd be teaching, maybe algebra or some physics equations or what have you, right? And she'd get called, there'd be an administrative crisis. So right in the middle of the lesson, she'd have to stop and go take care of that. Very disruptive. So, and this was the greatest gift she gave me, though I hated her for the whole year for making her do this. She said, you, I'm in the back row, was trying to disappear into the woodwork. You're going to come out here and you're going to finish the lesson. Me? Are you serious? Yeah. At that point, and I was 2 years younger than the rest of the class because I skipped a couple grades, and so it was not the easiest situation, right? Because I'm the equivalent of a 7th grader, and just in front of the 9th graders, and the teacher has just appointed me the person to teach. You can imagine this was going to be difficult, right? But fortunately, I don't know. Call it the gift of God, whatever. They found my way of explaining algebra so much more fun than Sister Frida's. Heaven help me. Fantastic. Then they would wait for Sister Frida to be called away and gladly help me. Well, here's some more chalks. Let me erase the board for you. It was fun, and that's when I discovered something very important, a lesson that I've carried with me to this day. You've got to put yourself out there. Do not be afraid. So when Sister Frida yanked me from the back row and made me stand in front and explain something, my first thought was, what have I done to you? I'm right there doing my work beautifully and just, why did you have to pick me? Years later, I actually met her and I said, why did you do that to me? And she said, I knew you had that in you, but you were afraid. So I had to break you of that fear, and that was the only way I knew how. I said, do you realize how brutal and traumatic that was? Do you know? She said, growth is pain, you gotta accept that. And I said, well, I wasn't. Today, when I think back of her words, they ring true to me. But when she told me that when I was about, 19 or 20, I thought, yeah, sure, whatever. That was sort of my thinking. But I also discovered another thing, which is when I explain stuff to other people, I actually learned the material. And that's when I said, a light bulb went on in my head. I thought I was teaching my classmates. But no, I was learning it too. In fact, I was learning it so much better. So from then on, I made a vow, whatever place I went to, I'm going to teach whatever I know, freely. Give them all I know, to anyone who would listen. So my next stop was my undergraduate school. This is the prettiest picture I could find of my house. So I have very fond memories of this place. It's the prettiest picture I could find. It never looked this good when I was there. So obviously, they finally invested in keeping it. This is in a town in the eastern part of India. It's called Kharagpur. And you got to understand how admissions work in India at the time that I was studying. So you took this entrance exam. Every high schooler in the country took that exam. So, we've always been, right now our population is 1.2 billion. It wasn't that high then, 700 million. But imagine every teenager taking this exam. And only 1,500 spots out of 4. So if you do the ratios, you wouldn't even show up for the exam. This is ridiculous. You have better odds of winning the lottery. So the exams are mostly taken by men, women. So I had no women to study this. I said, I'm going to try this. My father said, sure. Oh, what are you going to do? So, right? I said, no, what am I going to do? No one's expecting me to do anything anyway, so this should be fine. I'll just go take it. And I was fortunate enough to get it. Now, there are 5 of these institutions, and this one is the closest to my home, because when I got there, I was only 16 years old, so I had to figure out a way. So I had figured out sort of the important things in life, like how to get laundry down and so forth. So I picked the institute that was closest to my home, and every Saturday I would take my entire laundry in a huge bag and take it home to mommy. So yeah, it was bad. But I'll tell you the most interesting thing about this place that really shaped who I am today, and I think helped me navigate the world of computer science, which has gotten a lot better. So I'm hoping all you young women will jump in and be part of this whole enterprise. So remember I said 1,500 people, right? 5 institutes, so 300 in each. In my class of 300 in this institute, can you guess how many women were part of that class?
One.
That's good. 2. Hang on. 2 women. And 298 men. Can you imagine sitting in a lecture hall like this, and with 300 people in Math 101, and then just the 2 of us. And the ritual in these places was attendance was taken very seriously. So unlike here, we're very lax, but there, the teacher would come in and spend the first, I would say, 7 minutes going number 1, number 2, number 3, and you're supposed to go here, here, and here, right? And so my number was 150. So actually, my friend's number was 137. So 137, and high voices here. The professor says, "What is that?" Oh, and we're all sitting in the back, hoping the teacher would notice. The 150, and he says, "Oh my God." So I remember a math teacher going, "Are you sure you belong here?" And we said, "Yeah. Hey, we got into the same exam all these other blokes got it." I mean, what do you mean? So it was tough. Most of the teachers thought we were just there for a lark. But my friend and I were not there for a lark. I mean, we graduated number 1 and number 3. So, yeah. Thank God, because if we didn't have that, that skepticism greeting us, I don't think it would have pulled out the best out of us. I know that for both of us, our very best was brought out. And so here is the funniest thing I have to say about that experience. By the way, my teachers, after the first year, realized that me and my friend were not, we were serious, right? Because they would post, and in India, I have to tell you, that in that era, they would post the entire 300, the ranking of 300 people on the wall. So you could go there and actually just, who wants to, it's terrible. So 1 through 300, they rank you with your, GPA. Brutal. But, that was the way the system worked. So once the teacher said, hey, these girls are being business, my mechanics teacher, I know, invited me to his office and he said, I can't believe it. I said, what do you do? I mean, how? How did you make, this grade on this stuff? This is not possible. I've been teaching for 30 years. He said, the only way I can accept you is if I make you an honorary man. So you are an honorary man in my book. I told him, you know what? Sorry, professor. Honorary man ain't good enough for me. I'm a woman, and you better deal with it. So, do not ever be, no, the greatest gift was the friendship of, my good friend, and we were able to get through the 4 years of college. But it really toughened me in a way that nothing else in life has toughened me, and prepared me for my next stage of life, which was graduate school. I got terrific letters from my teachers, and they wanted me to, I remember I graduated with a degree in electrical engineering actually, and had 1 year of computer science, because computer science was just starting out, and so I didn't have there wasn't a major in computer science. And this teacher of mine, he said, you will not stay in India because you are too, too different. You're going to have people just get too said, you're not you look like a traditional. He said, your problem is you look like a traditional Indian person, but then when you speak, it's like, who is this person, right? He said, you have to go to another place that will be, allow you to sort of get to the next level in your thinking and your education. So he wrote me fantastic letters, and I got into, I applied to 4 schools, and I got into all 4 of them. Thank you, Professor Keshavmurthy. And I decided to come to Stanford, sight unseen. I mean, I just looked at the weather patterns, and I said, that looks like the best, right? The others were all in the east, and I said, okay, that's where I'm going to go. I had 5 glorious years there. Like I said, in the beginning, the worst part was actually leaving, because you do have to finish your PhD and move on. So it was a terrific experience, because for the first time in my life, I was with peers who were phenomenal. I learned more from my peers than I learned from any of my teachers at Stanford, and they were phenomenal. Okay, so just so you know. So this was so crucial for me. I mean, this was a very important part. But in every place, what I discovered was, if you loved what you did, you would always get that community around you that could support you. You may have to look for it a little bit and not get discouraged. I would hate to tell you that everything I did was a success. Please don't think that, okay? And I will give you one of my failures, just so you have a sense of it. 7th grade, geometry. My first test. I had no clue what was happening in the class, okay? Take my first test. I don't think that's really the only time I got a 0. What a wake-up call that was. I was very good at algebra. Even today, algebra is sort of my natural. I'll do algebra in my head, no problem. Geometry, I really have whatever. Okay. At that point, I was pretty despondent. I came home and I told my mom and dad, this math business ain't going to work out for me. I just flunked out in geometry. And I have to thank my teachers and my parents who said, what? You fail one test and that's the end of the world? Come on, you're going to fail many more, my dad said, very reassuringly. Get used to it. And at that time it sounded very harsh. It's like, he didn't say, he said, well, you want to learn geometry or not? Well, figure out what you didn't learn. Go speak to the teacher. Go open up a couple books. Figure out. I worked so hard that 7th grade because I did not want to fail geometry. I did very well in geometry ultimately, but yeah, that's it. So, I've had as many failures as successes. But I think it's your attitude to the failure that's so important. I tell my daughter this because I think one of the mistakes we make, and even I make this, is to equate yourself with what you do. Yourself is good. You may sometimes fail at something, you may sometimes succeed at something. But that's not who you are. So as long as you have faith in yourself, believe, it'll all work out. Right? What happens is we end up giving up prematurely. Shouldn't do that. And I have to thank all the people along the way who helped sort of support me at the times when I needed that support. So for you, my prayer will be for each of you to have that kind of support system. So look for it. Sometimes, the support system doesn't sort of magically appear in front of you. You may have to look for it, but look for it because it's what keeps all of us going. My first academic job was here at Cornell. But I had a 2-body problem because I married, my husband at that time was teaching at Carnegie Mellon University. And this was in Ithaca, New York. Yeah, so he said, this is not going to work. It was so difficult. So we looked around the map of the United States and said, which state is large enough to accommodate 2 academic careers? And the short answer appeared to be Texas. And I came to Rice. I have to say, I have enjoyed every minute of my time at Rice. Okay, this is my 16th year at Rice. Because I'm almost as old as you are, right? And it has been a blast. So, this is the long version of my story. Skills Fest? Okay. I have to tell my daughter this. Maybe I should record this, so that she says, oh, you told me that everything was cool. All right. So, you ready to now do a little bit of math? All right. Okay. Okay. I'm going to show you 5 problems, and we're going to solve all these problems by the same method. So, I call them recognition problems because in all of them you have to recognize whether this object is of a certain type or not. So, is this play written by Shakespeare? You know, people constantly find new manuscripts or old manuscripts, and they want to know, did this person write it? Did Thoreau write it? Whoever write it? So it's a big area, actually, authorship attribution. If you look at people in the English and humanities, those departments, a lot of time is spent by human experts trying to figure out whether this was written by someone or not. Spam detection we've already talked about, right? Whether a male spam or ham, which is a good male. Even though I'm vegetarian, I still use the word ham. So. Face detection, is there a human face in this image, which is a problem that your camera solves, right? Because it outlines your face in a picture. Handwritten digit recognition, this is the one I'm really going to talk about. Is this handwritten digit a 2 or a 3 or whatever? Your Android phones will do handwriting recognition, right? And so the algorithm that is used is exactly the one that is used to solve all of these problems. An example from a recent project, I'm working with some doctors who are diagnosing esophageal cancer. Esophageal cancer is a very difficult cancer to detect. It's often detected stage 4, after which, so we're looking at technologies where we can catch the cancer a lot earlier. Humans are notoriously bad at detecting that. So from the images, human experts, doctors are only 50% accurate in predicting whether it's got cancer or not. And what I'm going to tell you today, and the methods can diagnose cancer with 85% accuracy, which is significant, 50%. It's not 100%, but it's better than what the best humans can do. So there are 2 ways we can think about solving all these problems. The standard approach, the one that has been used for a long time in the field of computer science, is you talk to experts in each of those areas, right? So if you want to know if a piece of text was written by Shakespeare, you go talk to your friends in the English department who specialize in Shakespeare, and you say, what's characteristic of Shakespeare? How do you tell that this was, what are the signature elements of Shakespeare? And then we write algorithms that pick up those elements, we'll go look at, well, Shakespeare uses this kind of language, and so on and so forth, and we write programs. We write programs to do that. So essentially, we solve the problem, and all the computer does is kind of execute our method, right? So we're limited only by sort of our imagination about how we do this. This is a slow process, as you can imagine. Because first you have to go talk to the expert, work with them to figure out what the criteria are, and then you have to do the computer programming piece, make that work, so this is bad. The second approach, which is the one I described at the start of my lecture, is to say, give computers training data and have them figure out how to recognize objects on their own. This is how we are trained as humans. So we're going to try that approach on machines. So just a little animation for you to see. To do authorship attribution, we're going to look at all the collected works of Shakespeare, Thoreau, all the authors we know, and we use that as training data. We tell the computer, look, these are pieces by Shakespeare, these are pieces by Thoreau, these are pieces by Mark Twain, these are pieces by Arthur Conan Doyle, whatever, the whole canon. And all of this is electronically available, so showing that to a machine is easy peasy. You get a new document, and now we want the machine to say, is this new manuscript written by Shakespeare? Because it's already trained with all of those examples. Is this close enough to the Shakespeare ones or not? We never have to explain what is special about Shakespeare. We have given it all this data. And actually someone did that in 2003 and proved that an old manuscript found in some theater in London was actually written by Shakespeare, and the experts agreed using a machine learning algorithm, as it turns out. We've already talked about spam detection. So Gmail is watching the things that you like and the things that you don't like. That's your training data. And it categorizes all of your email pieces into either ham or spam. And then when a new piece of email comes along, it actually uses the model it has learned from your training data to predict whether this new email is spam or not. And same deal with face detection. We give it images containing faces, images containing, not containing faces. And then we train, we get a new face. My daughter said, do not use that image, so I hope I'm not wrong. But that was the easiest one I had. Does the new image have a face in it? And it'll say yes or no because it's trained on this model. Do you see a pattern here, right, how this is going to work? Same with handwritten digit recognition. The post office runs a very interesting competition among every year. So the post office wants to process mail as quickly as possible. It wants, and when we send pieces of mail and we don't have typed labels, they're handwritten, right? Envelopes. So it has algorithms that actually read. So as the letters are going past on the conveyor belt as a camera, it's scanning your address field and it's basically reading the zip code. Okay. To have your algorithm accepted by the post office, you need to have an accuracy of 99.5999999%. Okay? The method I'm going to teach you today will get you to 80%, so you know. But I can give you pointers to how to actually improve that to 99. It's going to require a little more mathematics than the stuff you've learned in high school. Right? This is why we need to go to college and get some more mathematics so we can actually build it, even pull the algorithms. So this data set is from what the post office publishes. So they have 60,000 digits, and they give it to you, and you have to prove that you can recognize digits of that. You get a new digit, you train on this data, and then you can predict the key. And finally, this is the thing I just talked about. Oh, sorry. You're giving images of non-cancerous and cancerous regions, and what we end up doing is we actually extract features from these images or aspects of these images, and we train a machine learning algorithm on it. So when we get a brand new image, we can predict whether it has this cancer in it or not. So this is how it works. Here's a summary of what I just told you. So the inputs, as computer scientists, we think about when we are given a problem. In fact, not just computer science. Actually, this is what your math teacher or even physics teacher tells you. When you read a problem, you need to know what's given and what you have to calculate, right? That's step one. What is given to you and what you have to estimate. So here, the inputs to the recognition problem are lots and lots of examples and non-examples of some category. And you're given a new object from maybe that category. And the output is figuring out, is the new object a member or not a member of the category that you have examples and non-examples of. Seems like a simple, straightforward problem, right? I give you chair, 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 not chair, not chair, not chair. And now the computer has to figure out. This is a hard problem, friends. Wandered in the desert sands for 40 years before we figured out exactly how to do this. So very smart people spent a lot of time figuring out. And isn't it cool that the answer lay in mathematics that you already know? We had to come all the way back to high school to say, that's how we should have thought about the problem. So the stuff that you are learning right now is super important. It's important because it's the foundation for all the stuff that you learn later. But it's also important because sometimes it's the right tool for the job. So, even though the English language statements of the problem are framed as yes and no questions, right? Is this written by Shakespeare? Is this a 2? Is this a 5? It turns out we're better off going back to probabilities. So how many of you have taken probabilities before? I'll give you a quick preview of probability. The probability stuff is intuitive at one level and unintuitive in others, okay? And in my own life, I've seen probability theory multiple times. Each time, my appreciation has grown, right? So if you're seeing this for the first time, fear not. I'll try to keep this at an intuitive level so you understand the core idea. It's actually back to 18th century mathematics. that you already know. And this is a new approach to solving all recognition problems. This was discovered, this connection to 18th century mathematics that you already know was discovered 15 years ago. And the new approach has basically revolutionized speech recognition, face recognition, handwriting recognition, gene recognition, text recognition, just about any recognition problem there is. So this is how we're going to frame the question. What is the probability this new manuscript was written by Shakespeare? What is the probability the new piece of email is spam? What is the probability the new image contains a face? Etc., etc. See, this is what we'll be asking. You might say, how does that help? Let me give you a little example. So let's go back to spam detection. Suppose I tell you that the probability of this new email that I saw of being spam is 0.7. So I would write that mathematically as that conditional probability you see up there. The probability that it is good email given this new piece of email is 0.3. That means there's a 30% chance that this new email is actually good, and a 70% chance that it is spam. If I gave you this information, then you can use the following algorithm to pick the right answer. There are only two choices, right? It can be ham or it can be spam. I know the probability of it being ham, the probability of it being spam. Picking the more probable model is obviously the right answer. So you would say it's more likely to be spam than ham. 0.7 is bigger than 0.3. So that's it. So all of these problems, what I'm going to show you is, we will calculate the probability of a model, ham or spam, given evidence, which is the new email, and we will calculate its probability. That's what we'll do. And then we look at which is the higher probability, and that's what we're going to say. That's the category we're going to predict. Simple, right? Yes?
Is there a threshold to this, or does that have to be based on the majority? What if it's like 0.51 spam and 0.49 ham? Like, what do you, or like you want to choose ham or spam just to use?
Yes, excellent question. So, excellent question. So, I'm giving you the super simplified version where we just do a greater than check, right? So, the way I just explained it to you, if it was just, 0.51 versus 0.49, 0.51 wins, right? But it's not as clear a winner as 0.7 or 0.3. So I would still call it spam. I would give it a confidence measure. So
Based on statistical significance?
yes, I would say, hey, I'm not that sure because they're so close. And the Google spam filter actually has a window. So it puts a distance and a threshold, and it says if the gap between the two probabilities is less than 0.1, it basically has a new category. It says, and so it refuses to make a prediction. So there are problems where the cost of making a wrong prediction is so high, we have to be quite conservative. Let's say you are predicting cancer, and the probabilities are working out to be, 0.50001 and 0.49999, and then you go, oh my God, I'm going to send someone to chemotherapy or not give them any treatment based on that. At that point, you order more tests and improve your estimates. Yes, that's what you would do. Excellent question. But is the idea clear? Because if this idea is clear, it's downhill from here. Yeah, easy. So, recognition means tell me the conditional probability of a category or a model with respect to a new object or piece of evidence. So we are going to estimate this probability. In the rest of the lecture, I'm going to tell you how we do it. So you can apply it to every recognition problem you can think of. Because now you have the magic recipe. So, quick primer on, how am I doing on time? It's not looking good, is it? No.
Yeah.
This is not looking good at all. All right. post the entire lecture. I'll send it to Leticia, and you can walk through it. Today, you think I can get 10 more minutes so I can walk you through an example?
Yes, correct.
Feel free to say no. It's like, we've heard you enough.
Let's get.
I won't take ill of you, you know. 1 hour is quite a long time. I know, like I said, I have a 17-year-old at home. I know about attention spans, and I won't take it amiss. It's okay. I'll quickly walk you through probability theory, and I'll show you one example, okay, and that's it. And actually, this is how the Google spam filter works. So today you will leave, and you can, tell your elder siblings, I know how to Google spam filter works, right? And explain it to them. Okay. All right. So first of all, simple idea, probability theory. We all understand what probability theory is, right? What's the probability I'm going to stop talking in 10 minutes? We hope it's 1. Okay, if you have a fair coin, you toss it, the probability comes up heads, we hope is 0.5, right? Not the one with the two-headed coin, you know the probability. Okay, so, all right. So we know the idea of unconditional probability. Probability, a number between 0 and 1, you've seen all that. Okay. You don't need this. I think you guys get it. Here is the more difficult idea. So I'm going to spend 3 minutes on this. This is the idea of conditional probability. What is the probability of A given B? And its mathematical definition is the probability of A and B divided by the probability of B. And the way to understand this, if B were the case, in how many of those cases is A also the case? A also true, right? So it's probability of A and B divided by the probability of B. And we assume, obviously, the probability of B is bigger than 0 because we can't divide by 0. World is slow. So in what fraction of worlds in which B is true is A also true? So I'll give you an example because I'm going to use this in a little question for you. So, meningitis, a disease that affects young people. And one of its symptoms is a sore neck. So the probability that you have a sore neck, given that you have meningitis, is 0.5. So what it says is, of all the people who have meningitis, 50% of them will have the symptom of sore neck. 50% of them may not. They may have other symptoms, certainly not the sore neck. So you understand how that works, right? People with a sore neck and meningitis divided by the number of people who have meningitis, that ratio is 1/2. So I'm going to draw you a picture so you keep this in your head, because we're going to do something a little more tricky with this. So the outer rectangle represents all people, and then I'm giving you a couple of numbers to think about. First, the probability that of sore neck N is 0.1. So I've drawn you a rectangle that's roughly, not to scale, 10% of the entire big area, right? That's sort of what it represents. The probability that of meningitis, particularly if there's no meningitis epidemic going on, is only 0.025. So notice this red rectangle? That represents the fraction of the population with meningitis. It's smaller than the population with sore necks, right? Because 10% of the population is sore neck at any time. This is the population with meningitis. Now here is the statement, the conditional probability. The probability you have a sore neck, given that you have meningitis, is 0.5. Do you notice that I've positioned this very strategically? That half of this is in the black area. So the area in common between N and M divided by the area of the full M rectangle is 0.5. You see that? Yeah. Now, I need to caution you that the probability of meningitis given sore neck is not the same as the probability of sore neck given meningitis. Okay, just do that example. Cool. So, here is a little conundrum, and I want you all to participate and raise hands because I will not move with the lecture and we will break our 10-minute rule if you don't cooperate now. How's that? I woke up with a sore neck this morning. I know that the probability of sore neck given meningitis is 0.5. I panic. Call a doctor. I have meningitis. I have a 50% chance you need to check me out. Was I right in that? No? Looked good to me. So why not? I'll have another. Yes, thank you.
You concluded that you give the probability of meningitis given sore neck, because since you already had sore neck, and you start with the sore neck after given, and the meningitis is supposed to be the probability.
Yes. So I can't base my decision on the probability of sore neck given meningitis, because this assumes I have meningitis. So I can't just conclude that I have meningitis based on that. What I need to calculate is something a little bit different. I need to ask myself, what is the probability that I have meningitis given that I have a sore neck? Because that's all I know. I have a sore neck, not that I have meningitis. And so we need to calculate this probability from all of this. And here is where the stuff you learned in high school comes out. This was discovered in the 18th century by actually a reverend. He got his paper published in the Royal Proceedings. It's like it's the science and nature of the 18th century. And this is something you can derive in algebra class, today. In fact, this is probably what you already did anyway. What is the probability of M given N, meningitis given sore neck? That's, by definition, the probability of M and N divided by the probability of N. That's just a definition. And that can be rewritten as probability of sore neck given meningitis times the probability of meningitis divided by the probability of sore neck. So these probabilities have cool names. So if you want to impress for the seniors, unless you find rising seniors, you may have to find a college freshman and say, well, I know how to calculate the likelihood of that. Or, what are the priors on that? Stroke your chin back when you do that. It really adds to the. So this probability is called the likelihood, and this is called the prior. Right? So here's the deal. Sorry. If you calculate it, because we know the probability of, we know this is 0.5, we know this is whatever you call it, score. Yeah, 0.05, that's right. And we know the sore neck probability was 0.1, and if you plug all that in, that's it. So there is a 12.5% chance that I do have meningitis if I wake up with sore neck. Certainly not enough to hit the panic button, unless there's an epidemic, which sort of changes the numbers. So here it is actually in pictures again. So when I want to calculate the probability of meningitis given sore neck, I take the area common to N and M and divide by the area of N, which is this larger area. And that's what works out to be 0.125, right? Because this portion is 0.125, you divide by 0.1, so you get 0.1. See that? This little piece of this dexterity is called, this calculation is called Bayes' rule. And if you want to be all sort of computer sciencey about it, you'd call it Bayesian inference. Sounds a lot more important. But it's Bayes' rule, that's what it is. So if you know Bayes' rule, you can solve recognition problems. Why? Because we will start from the prior probability of the model. What is the probability I have meningitis with no information? I get a new piece of information, and I know something about this. I know that sore neck, probability of sore neck given meningitis is 0.5. This is the likelihood functions. And I know the probability of sore neck. And then I just apply Bayes' rule to calculate what is the probability I have meningitis given the new rule. So I will just show the process to you right now and we'll be done. And so here's the meningitis example again. I have two models. I could have meningitis and or no meningitis. There is a prior probability without any information, the likelihood of the probability of anyone having meningitis at any time in the population. And you get this from epidemiology, right? That's what the epidemiologists do. They gather all these probabilities and they update them year round. That's 0.025. So with the laws of probability, the probability you don't have meningitis is 1 minus that, which is 0.975. You get a new piece of evidence. You have sore neck. That's a symptom showing up. And you say, well, how should I update my belief in the model based on this new piece of evidence? So we have information associated, probabilistic information associated with the evidence, probability of sore neck given meningitis, and the probability of sore neck. And so this is what we're going to do. We just do the Bayes' rule. You plug in all the numbers. We have this number, we have the new evidence, we have the probabilities associated with the evidence, and then, ta-da, Bayes' rule, now called Bayesian inference. We calculate the probability of meningitis given SORNEC and no meningitis given SORNEC. And the probabilities happen to be from 1 through 5 to 0.875. So this is a no contest deal, right? 0.875, much bigger than 0.125. And so you say, don't worry, you don't have meningitis. Right? It's nice. So what I'm going to post this, and I want you all to solve this problem the same way. That's how you practice. Because in life, you understand a concept. This is something I'm trying to persuade my 17-year-old of. Is, the way I learn anything, I think all humans learn something, is, I hate to say this, so that's your practice problem. And if you can do this, it's fantastic. So the answer is on the next couple of slides, so don't take. But, so I'll have to, actually, let me get out of the show and actually, I want to end with one slide, so let me just find that slide. Okay, no, this one. So you might say, well, that's all fine, you told me about Bayes' rule and all that, but you promised to show me how to do handwriting recognition and all of that. It looks like you just, sold me short. Fear not, friends, I haven't sold me short. I'm going to show you how this maps exactly. All right, you want to do genre identification. The models are, it could be from Shakespeare, it could be from Ibsen or Thoreau or however many models you have. You find out what is the prior probability. And if you talk to scholars, you know, Shakespeare wrote a lot of stuff. Ibsen, not so much. Yeah, Thoreau. So you can use that just by counting how many things that you have in your training data. You can estimate these probabilities. Then you get a new piece of text. Then you need to calculate these likelihood functions. What is the probability the document comes from Shakespeare? The document comes from Ibsen. The document comes from Thoreau. And then, ta-da, Bayesian inference. And we can calculate the probability that Shakespeare wrote the document, Ibsen wrote the document, and Thoreau wrote the document. You look at those probabilities and make your call. The highest probability wins. Cool. Spam detection. 2 models. Ham or spam. You have a large training data set. At least in my data set, these are numbers from my world. 90% of the stuff I get is spam. Okay, 10% is good. Remember, the problem was, and the reason, by the way, that I get so much spam is, remember I said my Gmail ID is devika@gmail.com, and the reason mine is devika@gmail.com and not devika123@gmail.com is because the guy who built Gmail and the team that built, the lead of that team was one of my students. So there you go. He said, hey Devika, I'm making this new mail system, right? And do you want to beta test it? Sure. So that's why I have that. So, but there's a downside is now I get 90% spam. So evidence. New mail. You calculate the likelihood. What's the probability this new mail comes from my handset or the spam set? You can build these probabilities from the training data. Bayesian inference. The same rule I showed you. I calculated this probability. Probably that it's hand-given new mail, spam given. And I will do the final piece, which is the digit recognition. I have these models. I have these prior probabilities. I get a new digit. I have these probabilities. The probability the image is a digit 0, digit 1, digit 2, all the way to digit 9. There's an inference. And I calculate what is the probability of the digit being, 0, 1, or 9 based on the image. So my entire lecture will be posted. So the algorithm is there for you to implement. So I invite all of you whose favorite language may or may not be Python or Java, whatever your language is. You can build this in Excel, frankly, it doesn't matter. Whatever your comfort zone is. If you can count, you can write a digit recognizer. Remember, we learned that in what? Kindergarten? That's all you need. And computers can count very well. So it's a counting algorithm. Follow that, and you will easily get 80% accuracy. You try writing a digit recognizer on handwritten digits. You try to think, oh, it's that curve. How do you capture the curve? All kinds of things like that, right? You don't have to worry about any of that. If you can count, you are in shape. So I hope I invite you to sort of, to see the rest of my lecture. I so apologize going this over time. Hopefully I'll have time for a few questions. Yes, thank you. Thank you for your attention. I really appreciate it. So little time, yes.
Okay, so regarding probability to find, for like let's say digit recognition,
Yeah.
Would you still need an algorithm with characteristics regarding the image? Because otherwise, if it's just like
Beautiful question. So I'm glad you asked that. I was kind of hoping someone would. So in some problems, you will have to pick the characteristics. With digit recognition, I'll show you the structure of the model. Mind-blowingly simple, which is why even today when I talk about it, my hair stands on end and I can't believe this is true. So let me exit the show and I'll go to what the model looks like. Give me just 1 second. Here it is. Digits are represented by, this is what a digit is represented, 28 by 28 pixel array. And you see those gray pixels, they define the boundary. The white pixels are the interior, and the rest is the background. All right? So that's how we capture the image, right? So it's down sample. See how grainy it is? It's really bad. Right? I mean, we have, the thing on your iPhone will get higher quality pictures. But we take a high quality picture and we degrade it to 28 by 28, right? And then this is the model of probabilities that we build. Oh, sorry. Why is it running out there? Remember the 2 sets of probabilities we have to learn? One is the probability of seeing the digit at all. So if I give you 60,000 digits that the post office is giving you, I count how many of them are ones, how many of them are twos. It turns out that the data set that the post office gives you is evenly divided. So the probability of seeing any digit is 10%. So that's the first piece. Remember the first set of probabilities? The second set of probabilities are very interesting. So let me show you what they are. These are the conditional probabilities, right? For each pixel, right? So each little square, the one that's drawn in a darker shade, like that or that, I ask for each of the digits, what is the probability of how many times do I see a 0 in it? So this is a white pixel, a gray pixel, a dark pixel. So I just count, I look at all of my 28 by 28 images. I look to see how many times does the gray pixel occur, the white pixel, and then I normalize it so I get it to a probability, right? First I do raw counts. That's why I said if you can count, you're in business, because that's all you need to build this model. And then you apply, you look up these probabilities and multiply them out, and then you using Bayes' theorem, and you're done. Yes.
Do you know if there are official probabilities for all that stuff somewhere? If there's like a reliable source to get these probabilities?
See, you can calculate them from the data because it's a simple counting operation.
Yeah, I know you can do it yourself, but I just think it would be easier, like, to go and find it on the internet or something. Do you know if there's a specific source or?
If you want to double check the numbers, there are places with the repositories, but you can learn it from data. Yeah, and actually that's a very good way for you to understand what's happening at the guts of it, rather than so. Digit recognition is a well-studied problem because there's a lot of commercial interest in it. So there are large training data sets. So what you're talking for the kinds of problems where I would investigate an approach like the one we suggest
is when you don't have a lot of data, or if the data is behind walls that you cannot cross. For example, I'm very interested in figuring out if hospitals have this real problem, right? It's called the readmission problem. That is, someone gets discharged from a hospital and they come back within 30 days, right? So this is called the 30-day readmission problem. Now clearly, the government now wants to punish hospitals for releasing people too early and having them bounce right back, right? It's like, why did you release them? You should have kept them longer in the hospital, made sure they were fine before you sent them out, right? So I want to help hospitals understand under what circumstances they should release a patient or keep them longer. So this is called the readmission problem. Now here is the huge difficulty with that problem, right? Hospitals don't want to tell you anything. It's like, you stand out there and tell me what I need to do. No, I can't. I tell them I do machine learning. You don't give me data, you get no answers, right? So you give me training data and then we'll talk, right? So for all of these problems, one thing, and this is why I'm so excited about the new sensors and all of that. Right now my phone keeps track of how many steps I take. And if I by mistake open that app and I go, what, only 600? I felt like I walked so much more today, right? So all these kinds of data that we're gathering with all the instruments we carry, I think that will become less of a problem. And then we can do simple counting things and actually get damn good marks.
Okay.
Okay, so let us thank Dr.